So during this video, I'm just going to provide an update on the multi-unit freehold block that I purchased over a year ago now. I thought I'd give a bit of an update as to where we are with it now. So in the last video, I talked about some arrears that had accumulated with some of the tenants that lived in the freehold block. So give an update on that first. Well, basically two of them. So there's one guy, the first one was a tenant who basically had a job in the area, but I think he had his own kind of property somewhere else. What he did is he basically didn't pay his rent for a few months. The letting agent was trying to get hold of him, sending him letters to remind him to pay. And it turned out what he'd done is he'd basically put his keys underneath the door. So rather than kind of go in and say to the agent, listen, sorry, I haven't paid my rent, but I need to move out, he just basically put his key under the door. So the issue with this is that it means that obviously the agent didn't know he'd left, and I can see why he probably did it. He didn't want to go in and sort of be embarrassed, but he's basically put his key under the door, and then he's walked off owing about £1,600 in total. So that was quite frustrating because it obviously meant we didn't know it was empty for a while, and so we weren't able to kind of re-let the property. It was just sat empty for a period of time. So that's the first one. The second one, he kind of moved into the one studio flats. So they basically they're all one bedrooms flats, less one which is a studio. So it's a lower rent than the others. And basically the tenant in that one, he moved in and basically didn't pay rent for, it must be best part of nearly 8 months. So he didn't pay any rent and refused to move out. So obviously we went through the escalation for the agent of kind of telling him he's going to be evicted, going through the formal process for evicting tenants. And then eventually he's moved out now, and the locks have been changed. And yeah, he owes about £3,000, just under £3,000. So that and the annoying thing as well is he left the property in quite a mess. So he left a lot of his possessions in there. It was just a kind of mess, so I have to pay now to get that cleaned up. And so yeah, basically I've got two sets of arrears totaling about £4,600. So it's quite a lot of money actually to be owed. So this is what I'm doing about it. I thought I'd firstly just talk about so how you account for that. So it's a limited company that I have. This property is owned through a limited company. So I think some people would make the mistake of accounting for it by just saying their rent for that year was less by the amount that they kind of were owed. So the rent receivable, they kind of put that figure as minus £4,600 than it would have been because the tenants didn't pay that much. But that's incorrect because it's not. It's accruals-based accounting we use, not cash-based accounting. So actually, the correct way to do it would be to account for it as a debtor. So you'd have the rent receivable figure would still be the same full amount as if you would receive the full amount. But then actually you then have separate to that you have a debtor. So it's classed as an asset to the company for the amount which the tenant owes you, or the tenants owe you. And then what will happen is, if then later down the line it becomes likely that those the debt is doubtful, it's unlikely the tenant's going to pay you back, then there's a slightly different accounting for there, where it's basically written off eventually if it's not going to be paid. But initially how it's kind of recognised for limited companies is rent receivable figure stays the same, but then you have a debtor, which is the how much the tenants owe you. So yeah, that's how it's accounted for. Then yeah, this is what I'm doing about it. So I kind of thought about whether I'm content just to kind of let that slip and kind of move on, and maybe that would be the easiest thing to do. But actually it's quite a decent amount of money, and particularly with the second tenant I talked about, I'm just annoyed how he kind of left the property in bad order. And my kind of worry is he's going to go on now to like live in a different property, and he's probably going to treat it in the same way. So I looked around and I noticed on Facebook there's a kind of an old colleague of mine who's got a business, and he was just asking somebody how they can go about getting back money they're owed by people who haven't paid, customers who haven't paid. And I noticed that another business person I know who we used to work with posted a link to a company who basically are a debt collection agency. So I looked into it a bit more, and actually I've decided to go with this company and just try and get back some of this money. So what's happened initially, I've just kind of registered with them. They kind of are basically going to escalate through a series of steps. So the first one is they have the contact details and forwarding address of these two individuals. They then basically send them a series of messages and emails to try and get them to pay. And if that doesn't work, eventually then it kind of goes to court. So eventually these tenants will be taken to court. And it'll end with them hopefully being given a kind of a county court judgment or a court order to make them pay the money. So yeah, it's early days yet. I've only just kind of told the debt collectors and instructed them to proceed, but I'll keep you posted on how that goes. I'm hoping to get some of that money back. You know, even if I have to pay a fee, which I will, it still means I'm going to get something back, hopefully, rather than nothing back at all. And it's also a bit of the principle as well of just somebody not paying. I think it's yeah, I'm not happy with the principle of it if someone just not deciding not to pay. So I'm definitely going to follow through. So yeah, that's a kind of update on there. And another issue I've had in this property is so there was a bit of I think I mentioned it in a previous video. There was some mold growing in one of the the flats. On further investigation, it's kind of become a bit of it's a bigger issue than I initially thought. So it's actually kind of this mold kind of grown in a void in the property, which has kind of resulted from a leak, and so that's been quite expensive to fix. But what actually happened is this then mold started to spread into one of the flats, and then one of the new tenants who moved in actually to into the same flat as the first tenant who was in arrears I talked about before. They've actually, rather than just kind of make a complaint through the letting agent, they've gone straight to environmental health from the council. So actually it's meant I've actually had to have a kind of an officer from the council come around to do a full inspection of the whole property, whereas actually we could have actually just dealt with it by them reporting it to the letting agent, but never mind, I've got anything to hide. So it's meant that an officer from the environmental health has come around to the property and done an inspection, and they pointed out a few other kind of minor issues with the property which has now been rectified, such as there was a banister, one of the kind of sets of stairs down to the studio flat missing a banister, so that's been now rectified. And there was a bit of a hazard in the communal area. Some of the concrete was a bit broken, which could have caused a trip, so that's now been rectified as well. But yeah, it's all kind of in hand now, and that's all been kind of fixed, so that's all good. And hopefully when they come around again in the next kind of couple of months, they'll be able to see the improvements they've made, and that'll be the end of it. So yeah, so I've dealt with basically arrears, which I'm now kind of rectifying, environmental health, which has now been rectified pending another inspection by the environmental health officer. And the other thing is, yeah, so we've got basically 5 of the flats are currently let. One is vacant, and that's the one where we have a tenant who's just moved out and left it in a bit of a mess. So I'm hoping that will get rectified shortly, and we'll get a tenant in there. But one thing I have done, and something I do every single year now, is with all my properties, is review the rents. So I look to kind of increase them all by about 5% each, because that's kind of take into consideration the changes to market rent in the local area. So that's all happened now, and it's meant I can basically get it's increased the return on all the total return on the property as it kind of turns over more rent, which will kind of help offset things like repairs I've had to make, also some of the arrears, but also just make my business overall more profitable. Yeah, so that's kind of a quick update on the multi-unit freehold block that I purchased over a year ago now. Yeah, quite a lot of repairs and arrears as well, but I don't want that to put people off. It's still a good kind of cash flowing asset that I've got. I would definitely look to buy more, particularly because of the kind of tax savings I made when I bought the property. I've got another video, you can look into that, about basically how you can pay commercial rates of stamp duty if you purchase a multi-unit freehold block which has 6 or more units, because it's treated like it's a commercial property. So that was a good amount of money saved on the way in, and also it's a good high yielding cash flowing asset, so it's definitely one to keep. But yeah, there have been some issues with it, but I'm rectifying them. Anyway, just a quick update. Hope you found that useful, and I'll put more updates in the near future.